Esther chapter 8. We're almost done with Esther. 8:14. Yeah, that sounds about right. 8. Let's try it at 8:15. Esther 8 verse 15. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. And the Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. All right, that's a good thing for the Jews. They finally come out on top. They've sure had to ride it out a long time and not know for sure whether or not they're going to, get what they need. That's a picture of what's going to happen in the tribulation. And at the end of the tribulation, the Jews going to come out on top. But it's going to be just as dicey a meantime as it was here. The Jews that don't bow in the tribulation to the Antichrist and worship him will be honored by Jesus Christ. Revelation chapter 20, verse 4. Revelation 20, verse 4. It says, I saw thrones, and they that sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus, and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads, or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. So they're promoted to leadership position. Any Jew that makes it through the tribulation without having succumbed to the Antichrist gets a position as a royal. Just like Mordecai shows up as a Jew, but now he's been given the signet and the power of government. These Jews in the tribulation are going to face the Antichrist, and it's going to be just like Haman. It's going to be a bitter battle back and forth. Now they get the proper clothing. God gives it to them. They're dressed in Christ's kingdom, it's linen, pure and white. Now in Mordecai's day, it's dressed like the pagan king, but it's obviously different than Joe Public on the street. They recognize him as the royal. Esther 8, verse 15. Here's his royal apparel of blue and white, with a great crown of gold, with garment of fine linen and purple. So he does have some linen in there somewhere, but this is a human king, so he doesn't know what the real royal apparel should be biblically. It should just be fine linen, pure and white. But it's set him apart. It's separated him. In the millennium, after the tribulation, there's 3 groups that get to rule. Not just one. We've already seen the tribulation saint gets to rule. But there's more people that'll have position than just that. Matthew 19, verse 28. Matthew 19, verse 28. Matthew 19:28. Jesus said unto them, Verily I say unto you, they which have followed me in the regeneration, when the Son of Man shall sit in the throne of his glory, ye also shall sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So, the 12 apostles, disciples, they get a seat of authority. We already know that. Jesus Christ set that in stone way back then. So they get to rule and reign. Well, they haven't gone through the tribulation. Doesn't matter, he's already put it in the books. And then, of course, we saw in Revelation 20 that the saints who make it through, the tribulation saints, they get to rule and reign. Now, the church-age Christian, yeah. You and I get the option of ruling and reigning. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to. It's not a guarantee. It's an option. In Luke 19, verse 13. Luke 19:13. Luke 19:13, he says this, "And he called his 10 servants and delivered them 10 pounds and said unto them, here's your job. Occupy till I come." So as Christians, we should be occupied with something until he comes. So as a Christian, you should have an occupation. Somebody asks you what your spiritual job is right now, you should know it. You should be able to spit it out. Whatever it is that God's given you to do, you should know that, because that's your justification for ruling and reigning. If you say, I don't know what God wants me to do, don't expect to rule and reign. He wants you to occupy. What's your occupation? And then, not only that, you don't just get to because you know what your occupation is, you have to actually do your occupation. It's not enough just to lay claim to it. You have to be involved in it. He said it's required among stewards that a man be found faithful. No faithful occupation, no ruling and reigning. Galatians 1, verse 11. Galatians 1, verse 11. Here's our age, the church age. "But I certify you, brethren, that the gospel which was preached to me is not after man. For I neither received it of man, neither was I taught it, but by the revelation of Jesus Christ. For ye have heard of my conversation in time past in the persecution of the church of God, and wasted it, and profited in the Jews' religion above many my equals in mine own nation, being more exceedingly zealous of the traditions of my fathers." So it's got to be something way more than all of that. It's got to be something more than religion. And he says that was what was socially acceptable in his time. Same with us. What's socially acceptable in our time is not what God considers your occupation. Your occupation is something spiritual between you and God, and you're going to have to do it. And don't worry about it coinciding with modern movements. No, it's from God. Paul right here shows up and says, look, I'm going to tell you something totally different than everything you've heard, but I got it direct from Jesus Christ. Verse 15. "But it pleased God, who separated me from my mother's womb and called me by his grace, to reveal his Son in me, that I might preach him among the heathen. Immediately I conferred not with flesh and blood, neither went I up to Jerusalem to them which were apostles before me, but I went to Arabia and returned unto Damascus." Okay, so there's something you can do. There's some occupation God has for you, and he'll want you to do it. I don't know what it is. You'll know, or one day it'll be revealed to you. And once you get it, get busy with it. Paul does. Now, that's what makes him so great in the Bible, is because he didn't just get it and brush it off. He didn't go run around and compare with everybody else and say, hey, what do y'all think about this? Would this be a good thing for me to do? He said, no, sir. I didn't go ask the bigwigs in Jerusalem. I got busy. And that's what we got to do. 2 Timothy 2, verse 12. Second Timothy 2:12. He says, if we suffer, we shall also reign with him. Now there's who gets to reign. No suffering, no reigning. If you deny suffering, no reigning. If you're given the option to suffer and you find you a way around it, that might be God giving you the option of ruling and reigning, and you just denied it. Finish the verse. If we deny him, he also will deny us. Well, it's not talking about salvation. The subject of the verse is reigning. So if you deny him the ability to make you suffer, he will deny you the ability to reign. So a lot of life suffering is not necessarily just life being hard and the world and the devil and all the other excuses you hear. Sometimes it's God saying, hey, I want you to reign. Now here's how I'm going to justify it. He says that he's just and the justifier of them that come to him. So God's not going to put you in a position that he can't say, I've got qualifications for that guy. I can prove why I put him there. He's just and the justifier. He's going to justify putting you in a position of authority if he puts you there. Back in, where are we? Esther 8, verse 15. The end of the verse. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. That's a good thing. When the righteous are ruling, people are happy. Now, they might not be happy as a mass multitude at the beginning, because it means some of the things they were doing is going to have to change. But it leads to peace. It leads to happiness. No righteousness, no peace. The Bible says there's no peace to the wicked. So if the wicked are ruling, don't count on there being any peace. When there's righteousness, there's peace. And it's probably going to go just directly, diametrically opposed to what you want to do and what you think is going to happen. But no, that's the way God's lined it up. If you're willing to suffer, you get to reign. If you're willing to submit to righteousness, you get peace. In Esther 8, verse 15. Or no, we just read that. In Proverbs 29, verse 2, he says this: when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. That's what happens. Now, they don't start out mourning. They start out, oh, goody, we're going to get just what we want. We can pay this guy off, and he'll put in exactly what we want. We know what that leads to. It leads to anarchy, and it leads to mourning, according to the Bible. In Esther 8, verse 16, he says they had light, and the Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. All of those are great things you want. The light there is lighting of lamps. They were not afraid to come out in the open. They lit up their houses again. They weren't trying to hide and, scurry off into the dark. And, a lot of times what you're going to find here is, in our age, a true Christian is the one that's persecuted. A true Christian. And most of them hide, because it's a fearful thing to go out into the wicked world, Christian or unchristian, and declare your position. So they're hiding. But you shouldn't. You shouldn't. We have light, and you can light it up and let them all know. You're not supposed to put it under a bushel. You're supposed to be right on the table, shining bright. The Jews had light, gladness, and joy and honor. Now, we find in verse 17, at the end of the verse there, he says, and many of the people of the land became Jews. Really? Oh, I'm a Jew now. I sent my DNA in, and I'm 0.25%, so I must be a Jew. Yeah, we've been persecuted. No, that's the way they did. But now, they had been given such the upper hand that it became advantageous to claim you were part of the Jews. Now, of course, they couldn't have changed their blood. They weren't literally a Jew. But what they did change was they changed their religion. Okay, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to act like I'm a Jew just like they are. Now, religiously, they wanted, okay, we're going to serve the same God, He's our creator too, and all that stuff. Now, that's a good thing. It can be used. A real Jew could have witnessed to them now, and given them the commandments and given them all that stuff. And that's good. A proselyte was good in the Old Testament. Daniel 6, verse 26, you see it happens again. Daniel 6, verse 26. Nebuchadnezzar got the big head one day, and God said, okay, you want to think that you are the supreme being? You're the supreme man? I'll make you an animal. And that's what he did. He made it an animal. And when he comes out of that thing, he makes a decree. Daniel 6:26. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. There's a pagan becoming a proselyte. That's that same thing. We're going to worship that God. That's been proven to us that he's got the power, and that's good. That's kind of what was going on here in Esther. In the Bible, there's 3 types of Jews. You can be one of 3 types. If a man is a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God picked them out. Brothers would be born, and he would say, that one's a Jew and that one is not. Even though they had the same blood. Even though they had the same parents. God says, no, I want that one, don't want that one. He decides what a Jew is. So you can be a physical descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and become a Jew. That's a radical physical Jew by descendant. If a man is saved and born again, he's a spiritual Jew, spiritually, but he's not a physical Jew. You didn't change physically when you got saved. You changed spiritually. Spiritually, you're put into a new family, but that's not a physical Jew. There's a bunch of promises in the Bible to physical Jews, not spiritual, physical. Spiritual Jews have something different. If you're in Christ, you get a whole bunch of things that other people don't get. We get some things that the physical Jew doesn't get. Now, so we don't have to fight each other over who gets what. We've each given our own. It's like when somebody dies and they have a will. The kids fight over who's getting what. When it's already been decided this one gets this and this one gets that. Well, now, it wasn't theirs to begin with. So why do they have to fight over who's going to get what? They're just mad because somebody else who's not even around is telling them what to do. The same in the Christian circle, you find the same thing. God's already said these physical Jews one day are going to get this and this and this. You spiritual Jews that are in Jesus Christ, you get this and this and this. And what happens? We want to fight over what the other guy's got. No need for that. If a Gentile joins Judaism in this age, if a Gentile says, it's probably somebody who's not saved, but they could be saved, says, I want to follow the rules and regulations of the Old Testament. That's a Judaism, Judeo. Then he's a proselyte. He becomes a student of the Old Testament Jewish system. He's counted a Jew, but he's neither a spiritual Jew nor a physical Jew. He's a faker. And he gets nothing. You're just a faker. Because the Old Testament Jew is out. They're no good. In this age, you need one thing: Jesus Christ. You don't have Jesus Christ, you got 0. So you don't want to be following the Jewish system. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a New Testament. The Old Testament would be all we need. It gives us the laws and the regulations and the rules. We'd all be Judaizers. The whole book of Galatians is about don't go become a Jew. That's Paul, who was a Jew, saying, I'm telling you, that ain't the way to go. Okay, so that finishes us up in chapter 8. So we'll start chapter 9. Yeah, we're in Esther chapter 9, verse 1, he says. Now, in the 12th... Yeah, I thought you would do that. Esther 9. That was a recording. Maybe. They flipped the recorder on real quick. Esther 9, verse 1. Now in the 12th month, that is the month Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put into execution, in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them that hated them. The Jews gathered themselves together in the cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, to lay hand on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell upon all people. This is a good day for them. And all the rulers of the province, and the lieutenants, and the deputies, and the officers of the king helped the Jews because of the fear of Mordecai. That's a special Jew. Because of the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. You'd think it'd be the fear of the king. But here Mordecai is holding the power of the king. So they're afraid of him. If he makes a new ruling, he's got the ring and he can sign it into act, as a legitimate law. So yeah, they better be afraid of him. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. Okay, so Mordecai has been sent right to the top. There's 2 decrees in the book that are great decrees. The first decree was made by man who made this decree without the knowledge of the king. That was the Haman's decree, that they could be killed. Okay? That shows you every man is under a decree. You're decreed right now to be deceased, to be extinct. Sin has a payment. The payment for sin is death. Every man has a ruling sitting right over his head. You're condemned. Now, there's another decree, this one right here, that will overrule that one. Both of them stay in effect. You choose which one you're going to be in. And we'll see as we go throughout this story that just because that was a fact doesn't mean everybody sided with Mordecai, because many didn't. Many still tried to enact Haman's system against the Jew, and that backfired on them. The first decree, of course, is kill the Jew, and if you do, I'll pay you. It's so carnal. Usually, spiritual things that are good, what God wants you to have, it's not connected with money on the front end. It's not about monetary, what this world can hold and, declare as your pedigree for your own righteousness. It's something beyond that. If you get good from God, it's usually done without you planning it. It's a surprise. He says, hey, buddy, I like what you're doing. Hear that. And you say, oh, wow, where'd that come from? I didn't expect that. That's God. It's the way he does things. The rulers of the kingdom may have no love for the Jews in our story. The rulers probably, these are the same rulers who were okay with killing the Jews. And they probably didn't have any special, I've decided I love Jews now. They knew what was good for them. I better let everybody know I like Jews now. They changed because they knew what was good for them. Okay, well, we'll take it. In Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 4, he says this. Ecclesiastes 9, verse 4. For to him that is joined to the living, there is hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. Now, that's a fact. These rulers were in a position of authority and power. They thought they were lions. But they realized, hey, Mordecai could have us killed if we let out that we were siding with Haman. Maybe we better make our position public that we like Jews now. Or we'll be the dead lion. It didn't matter how much power we had. The king has says it's okay to kill us. So I'd rather line up with the dog, the Jew, than to be the dead lion. And so I'm sure that was a lot of them. A lot of them lined up because they knew what was good for them. Mordecai, let's see. Esther chapter 9, verse 5. I'm going to skip some of this. In the Bible, you see this in history, but especially in the Bible, in the Old Testament. You'll see different Gentile kingdoms that have a Jew that comes to the forefront. And he'll come in and he'll hold a position of authority in a kingdom that's not a Jewish kingdom. You find the thing under Joseph. You find it under Daniel. You find it right here. When they promote the Jew to a high position, God blesses the country. He blesses that kingdom. Even though it's not a Jewish kingdom, because he's got somebody special that he likes down there. And when you're patting the person he's patting, and you're both patting him on the back, then God's going to be stuffing something in his pocket too. He says, I'll bless them that bless you, and I'll curse them that curse you. Talking about the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it's always been that way, especially you can see it in governments. Esther 9, verse 5. Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter, and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And in Shushan the palace the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men. That place. And Parshandetha, and Dalphon, and Asaphatha, and Portha, and Adalia, and Ardithea. I should have used my other self-pronouncing Bible tonight, but I didn't. Drop down to verse 10. A bunch of places there. The 10 sons of Haman, the sons of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, slew they, but on the spoil laid they not their hands. On that day the number of those that were slain in the Shushan the palace was brought before the king. Okay, so the enemy of the Jews should have gone into hiding. They should have done what the Jews were doing prior. The Jews before were hiding out, cutting the lights out, don't let anybody know we're here, just like they did under Hitler, same type thing. Well, that's what the Jews were doing. Now the tables have turned, and the idiot Gentiles that were the obvious enemies of the Jew have not gone into hiding. Well, what do they think is going to happen? 500 of them gone. That's it. Between the time Haman was hung on the 13th day of Adar, there were 10 sons of Haman and a group of people, obviously, who wanted to enact what Haman started, these 500, who are still the enemy of the Jews. And you'll see in compare verse 6 with verse 15. Look at verse 15. For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day of the month Adar, and slew 300 men of Shushan, but on the prey laid not their hands. They laid not their hands. Can't read. Okay, so now we're up to a total of 800. So on the 14th day, these smart Gentiles decided, hey, here's the plan. They're expecting us on the 15th, or on the 13th. What did I say? The 13th day. So the day after, he says, hey, look, it was supposed to happen, and, they came after and they got those guys. But, hey, let's keep going. We've got an act that we never did enact. We've got a ruling and we've not used it. Let's go the next day and do it. Well, guess what? That's illegal. The decree that Haman had was for a specific date. And they're on the wrong day. Okay, well, that tells you something. It's more than just they're trying to follow law. No, they literally hate the Jew. Because the law doesn't matter. Because the law had a date on it, and they're not within the date. So it's a supernatural, spiritual, satanic movement against the Jew. World has seen it many times. This cult has a large following. This is 75,000 total in all the provinces here, and you're going to find that there's a lot of people that are hating on the Jews. Now, a lot of them did switch sides. There's many provinces here. He's covering all the way down to India. So within that territory, you've got little cults, and you've got a big Satan pushing all of them. Anti-Jew, anti-Jew, anti-Jew. And here you see how, when I say cult, I don't mean human cult. I mean It's a supernatural power of the devil. That's what I mean. And that's what was going on here. Satan's hatred of the Jew was symbolized in this book by one man, Haman. 6 times in the book of Esther, Haman is referred to as the Jew's enemy. 6, the number of man, and will be 666 for the devil. In Esther 3:10, Esther 7:4, and Esther 7:6, Esther 8:1, Esther 9:10, and Esther 9:24. Those are the references where he's the enemy of the Jews. So, if you can take one thing away from the book, you know on just a very basic elementary level, don't be a Jew hater. Okay, we can get that much. We don't have to dig in with any concordances or glossaries or anything to find the answer to that. When a person, a group, or a nation becomes anti-Jewish, they're siding with the devil, because the devil is anti-Jewish. You can count on it. When you want to become the Jew and kick the Jew out, that's demonic. We don't believe in replacement theology. There's a big name for it. That is, the Christian is now the Jew. God doesn't like his people, the Jews. No, sir, that's satanic, because you're kicking out the Jew. Those people end up hating Jews. That's exactly where that goes. They become anti-Semitic because they claim they're the Jew. Okay, that's siding with the devil. If you become an anti-Jewish clique, what happens is that may not start out as satanic. That just may start out as stupid. It could be. Now, I'm not saying that the Jews are lovely people and you just want to always have them over to your house and everything. You might find one that's mean. Just like you might find an American that's mean. Yeah, I imagine that. All Northerners. I mean, you could find any people do that. They condemn a whole group based on one person. You can't do that. Okay, well, just because you meet one that you don't like. And that's what's going on here. The Jew probably here in our story has been given the blessing of God, and they've increased in wealth. Now, these are the Jews who should have gone back to Jerusalem, and they didn't go. Well, why do you think they didn't go? They had a good life and making money. They had their housing situation all set up. Everything's going smooth for them. They think, well, y'all just go on down there. I got everything I need right here. I don't need Jerusalem. Well, that probably made some people jealous. This is a foreigner coming in here. This is an alien. He's in our country, and he's living better than we are. I just hate Jews. And that's where it started. Well, before long, they're no longer led by man. It's the devil leading that program. And he does. Esther 9, verse 12. And the king said unto Esther the queen, the Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the palace, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's province? Now, what is thy petition, and it shall be granted thee? Or what is thy request further, and it shall be done? Wow. It almost sounds like the king enjoyed that, doesn't it? Because he says, I'm going to give you another request. What else you want? Well, wasn't that enough? Well, okay, then let me get my list out. And she's going to ask for some more. Then said Esther, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow, also according unto this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. So Haman's 10 sons weren't hung originally. They were hung the next day. Originally, they went in and they killed the 500 and the 300. The 10 sons were not part of the hanging party. And that was God's mercy, really. They just didn't take advantage of it. They could have got out free. Had they joined the Jews, they wouldn't have been killed. But they kept on with their father's hatred of the Jews. So Esther says, well, there's still that wicked family over there. Let's get the whole family gone. He was a bad enough leader, cult leader, that he had destroyed his whole family. He had convinced them to ingrain this hatred of Jews. And so even after he was gone, the 10 sons are still wicked enough to follow through when they have, in broad daylight, the evidence that that ain't the right choice. You want to be killed? Go for it. And they were. Verse 14. And the king commanded it to be done, and the decree was given at Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day, also of the month Adar, and slew 300 men at Shushan. But on the prey they laid not their hands. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together, and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes 75,000. That's a whole bunch of slewing. But they laid not their hands on the prey. Now you know that this is something spiritual. When a Jew's not touching the goodies. But they weren't. They were killing the ones who were against them. They were weeding out the bad seeds. And they were. And they weren't. They said, look, if they had it, we don't want any part of it. Now, for us, that's true too. You probably don't want to get the goodies from a wicked household. They probably are carrying some wicked spirits. So leave the goodies from a wicked household to somebody else that's too stupid to know any better. The Jews here said, look, there's something satanic about that group that's against us. The hatred for them has made them stupid that they can't realize that we're going to come kill them. They didn't go into hiding. They still want to proclaim that they're against us. There's probably some evil spirits connected to all their junk. Leave it alone. And they did.
Do you think maybe that Achan and the Valley of Achor was fresh in their mind too? So God killed all the people that took the goods. Achan.
Yeah, he killed the whole family.
The dogs, the cats, everything.
Yeah. That's true. I don't know.
I mean, they would have known about that story.
They should. Yeah, the Jews should. Absolutely. They should have known their history. Yeah, Adar 13 has come and gone in our story. At the end of the day, the Jews have killed 500 people in Shushan, their enemies. And then Haman's 10 sons follow suit thereafter. According to Haman's law, there was one legal day to do the killing on the Jews. Well, his cult decides Haman's not around to make laws, we'll make our own. That's anarchy. You find that happening. When a person won't follow the rules and regulations of the government, they become dangerous. Now, we're to obey God rather than man. But you better be sure that you're not violating God by violating man. Because he sets up governments. He puts governments in power. So you better make sure there's no way to obey the law beyond breaking God's. That's an extreme thing. So people want to claim that exemption as though it's an everyday occurrence, and it's not. I mean, you have got to make sure that at the judgment seat, you're going to be able to say, God, they wanted me to do this, and you say in these 15 verses right here, I can't do it. So I obeyed you. Then you're okay. But otherwise, you better just follow who you're under and let God handle them. Evidently, Esther had discovered there was a plot to come after her people again on the 14th day. And so she tells the king, when he just so happened to be so excited that he wanted to give her another request, she said, well, as a matter of fact, I did hear something the other day. How about we do this again? And they did. And it's a good thing. See, God, you can see God moving this whole book. Even though it's not, there's no mention of God in the whole book. Yeah, there's no preaching of God. There's no prophet in there. You don't even see the people praying to God, although we're guessing they probably were. But you see God for sure, moving and orchestrating events. Just as simple as this right here. As far as the king's concerned, he's already done everything Esther had required. Why does the king offer her another request? Because he didn't know it, but God was pushing him, hey, ask her if she wants something else. Go ahead, ask her. And then he had allowed her to know, hey, they're coming back tomorrow. They think you're only going to do this on the 13th, so they're going to come get you on the 14th. So she says, well, how about this? Let's go after them again. He says, sounds good to me. Go for it. Prophetically in the passage, we understand that the enemy of the Jews is going to be the enemy of the Jews in the tribulation. That's Satan. That's the Antichrist. And the 10 sons who help him destroy are the 10 kingdoms that come in there in Daniel and in Revelation 13. You'll find those kingdoms, and it's going to match right up. Both the dragon and the beast have 10 horns, and they represent 10 kings that rule with the Antichrist. Here they are. Revelation 12, verse 3. Revelation 12:3. Revelation 12:3. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, he's no good, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. Okay, there's the 10 that matches Haman's 10 sons. Look at the next chapter, chapter 13, verse 1. And I stood upon the sands of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns. That's a little different than the one we already read, because the other one had 7, this one has 10. And upon his heads the names of blasphemy. Either way, they're representing the enemy of the Jews, and you see it there. What time have we got to? We probably better stop it there. We'll pick up next week on Esther 9, verse 17. Esther 9:17.